Good afternoon. My name is Laura Pedofsky. I would like to thank the Scientific Committee for the opportunity to present today. I will be sharing with you the results from a study looking at the utility of an intra-vaginal biofeedback device for home pelvic floor muscle training. I have no affiliations to disclose. There is evidence that pelvic floor muscle training resolves symptoms of incontinence for most women. But the use of biofeedback to improve training effectiveness is equivocal. No device has provided comprehensive biofeedback on technique, nor simultaneous feedback to include intra-abdominal pressure and pelvic floor muscle pressure. Our team has created the femfit. This intravaginal device has 8 pressure sensors designed to produce a visual of the vaginal pressure profile. The femfit can measure all 3 vaginal pressure zones simultaneously. It has the ability to discriminate between pelvic floor muscle pressure and abdominal pressure. This visual biofeedback is sent to a user's mobile phone. The femfit device and its mobile app is interactive. A user can make the bird fly by squeezing and lifting their pelvic floor. This guides the user through a validated 12-week training program with graduated exercises. Our research group was curious whether this proposed treatment method could be utilised for home pelvic floor muscle training. This prospective interventional randomised pilot study involved women with stress or mixed urinary incontinence. 60 women were recruited and randomised into 2 groups. Group 1 used the femfit device and mobile app to complete 12 weeks of pelvic floor muscle training at home. Group 2 used the mobile app only, with no biofeedback, and did the same training. Note there was no control group in this study. All participants completed the same 12-week training program. The only difference was one group received the biofeedback and the other did not. This study is ongoing, so the following are preliminary results for 34 participants only. Here is the inclusion criteria. We really wanted women who had experienced minimum previous pelvic floor muscle treatments. The primary objective was to assess the feasibility of the biofeedback provided by the femfit to effectively teach women to contract their pelvic floor muscles correctly, leading to reduced urinary incontinence symptoms. Symptoms were measured using the validated questionnaire ICIQ-UI short form. The second objective was to measure the change in pelvic floor muscle pressure during a pelvic floor muscle contraction, measured by the femfit, and a change in pelvic floor muscle strength as measured using the modified Oxford scale. For both groups, a pelvic floor physiotherapist completed assessments at baseline and after the 12-week study treatment. She was blinded to the participant group allocation. A modified Oxford scale assessment was completed. Then the femfit was used to measure pressure generated during 3 5-second pelvic floor muscle contractions while supine and then repeated while standing. The physiotherapist inserted the femfit to ensure it was positioned correctly. To minimize study bias, the physiotherapist did not provide guidance or encouragement on how to perform a correct contraction. Descriptive statistics summarized results to analyze the differences in the 2 study groups over the 12-week treatment program. First up, we have the ICIQ-UI short form results. On average, both study groups reported a reduction in urinary incontinence symptoms. According to the minimum clinically important difference, which correlates with the Patient Global Impression of Improvement questionnaire, both groups experienced symptoms a little better, as their change score was at least 2.52. There was no statistical difference between the 2 groups. As we have a small study cohort, we can still look at the participants individually. Here is a chart with each line representing a participant, showing how the ICIQ-UI short form symptom score changed from baseline to post-treatment. A negative slope represents reduction in symptoms, as their score has reduced. The complete lines represent women who had a change score of at least 4, the minimum clinically important difference that correlates to the Patient Global Impression of Improvement questionnaire as much better or very much better. The modified Oxford scale shows an increase in pelvic floor muscle strength for both groups. There was a statistically significant change from baseline to 12 weeks for both groups, but no difference between the groups. Pressure profiles were measured by the femfit. This figure shows 3 pelvic floor muscle contractions a participant did while supine, and we were interested in the pelvic floor muscle activation pressure. To find this in each contraction, a 3-second average of each pressure sensor was calculated within the time segment shown by the vertical lines in each plot. Then, from sensors 1 to 6, the maximum pelvic floor muscle pressure was selected, which is represented by the blue dot. The intra-abdominal pressure is shown by the black dot, which comes from sensor 8. The pelvic floor muscle activation pressure was calculated by removing the intra-abdominal pressure from that maximum pelvic floor muscle pressure and is shown by the pink dot. These pelvic floor muscle activations of each contraction are then shown in the bar graph in the lower right of the screen. We want to analyse only the activation of the pelvic floor muscles. An average of all 3 contractions was calculated for each participant. Here are the results for pressure profiles comparing Group 1 and Group 2. There was no statistically significant change for either group between baseline and post-treatment. Finally, here is a small insight into participant feedback. The majority of study participants had a positive experience with the study treatment, both with and without biofeedback. Overall, the women in both groups appreciated the structured pelvic floor muscle training program. This study reiterates that pelvic floor muscle training is an effective treatment method for urinary incontinence, although it seems there is no difference between using biofeedback or no biofeedback. It is promising to see that participants in both groups have an overall reduction in symptoms while using a mobile app for pelvic floor muscle treatment. Biofeedback could still be helpful for some women. Thank you for your attention, and a big thank you to my supervisory team, Jenny, David and Paul, for guiding me through this research project.